So the difference between going on 1 date a month and 2 dates a week usually comes down to one thing, and that is your texting. You can have the best photos, the best profile, even great initial attraction, but if you can't close the deal over text, it's pretty much all useless. So I want you to think of it like sales. You can have all the marketing in the world, but if you can't seal the deal, the funnel is still broken. Now personally, I've had over 1,000 text interactions with women, and I've coached hundreds of men on this exact skill. Through that experience, I developed a simple framework that works every single time. It's called the AQS method. And in this video, I'm gonna break down for you step by step so that you can stop killing your chances and start turning conversations into real dates. And stay until the end where I go through a live example of how this works. Now, the reason why I love following frameworks so much is because I'm a very logical person. And so step 1, step 2, step 3, and visualizing that and seeing how that works in action just really helps my brain. And I know for a lot of you guys, especially if you're a software engineer or in the tech industry, which I do have a background in computer science and coding and whatnot, we all tend to be very, very logical. So following this framework is very logical, but at the same time, it still appeals to the female brain in terms of the emotion and the curiosity that we're gonna spark, all right? Now, keep in mind, this method is also purely for top of funnel. When I say top of funnel, I'm talking about when you meet them on a dating app after the match, or even after approaching a woman or meeting her on the street. It doesn't matter how you met her. Point is, this is purely for the top of the funnel, so just keep that in mind. So let's go ahead and start with step 1, which is the A, and that stands for assumptions, otherwise known as cold reads. Now, when I say assumptions, all this really means is making playful assumptions instead of basic questions or basic openers. We do this by looking into our pictures, prompts, or bios, or just literally making some shit up, all right? Now, the reason why this works so well is because it sparks a bit of curiosity, and then from there, it can actually spark an engaging conversation. Now, some examples of this might look like, you look like this type who's always planning her next trip, or I can already tell your trouble in the best way, or I bet you have a cute X accent. Once again, this is gonna spark curiosity. It feels more personal and unique, and it sort of flips the script from boring interview style texting that a lot of logical guys tend to do, including myself. Now, going back to the examples, you can pretty much put this in your own sort of phrase any type of way. It's just gonna follow that first initial format. So once again, you look like the type who's blank. I can already tell you're blank, or I bet you have blank. Now, if you're reading her pictures, profile, or prompts and you really can't think of nothing, this is where you want to have some canned assumptions in place. Once again, it doesn't always have to be true. You can literally make this up. Then from there, you can follow to the next step of the process, which is Q, and that stands for questions. Now, more specifically, this stands for open-ended questions. Now, open-ended question is something that the woman cannot respond a simple yes or no to. The reason why we get into such logical interview style conversation is because when you ask questions and when you're leading the conversation, especially if the woman isn't really high interest and she's not giving a lot of investment, they'll usually reply yes, haha, or no, or something very basic like that, and now you're kind of stuck with what to say. And so the easiest way to fix this, once again, is to now follow up with the open-ended question in which she can answer yes or no to. And so the framework and how we use open-ended questions simply starts with how, what, when, or why. For example, how long have you been in blank city? What's your go-to drink when you go out? When did you learn or start doing X? The reason why this works is because now we are leading the conversation and we are keeping the conversation flowing from that assumption. Number 2, we can gather investment on her part. So a very important part of the top of funnel is establishing interest levels or reading those, but also gathering investment from the woman. And so ideally, before we transfer to the middle of the funnel, she needs to show signs that she is interested through her conversation, meaning that we need to get more out of her. Remember, she's having like 10, 20 different other conversations at any given time. The other guys are asking boring logical questions, but now we're getting more investment from her part, which is gonna set more of a memory in her psyche to remember us and actually be engaged within that conversation. Now, another benefit of the open-ended question, especially if you go the more logistical route, which is my favorite, is that it can help you gather logistics for potentially setting up the date, especially if you live in a tier 1 city like myself, living in Miami, New York, LA, etc. You'll tend to have a lot of tourists or people coming in and out. And so it really helps to understand if they're living here or if they're traveling, or simply when did they just move to the city. All right, so we've gone through assumption, open-ended question. Now the next part part is the statement. Now the statement isn't really just saying a blank statement, more so we need to place a statement alongside with planting a seed. And so when you plant a seed, it's sort of the idea of letting her know that, hey, this is going to potentially lead to a date in the future. And ideally, it doesn't have to always be the case, but ideally, before we transfer to the middle of the funnel, we need to plant some sort of seed in her head. That way we can avoid time wasters, we can avoid attention seekers, and women who just aren't serious about actually being up for a date. Now, once again, when you lead with a statement instead of a question, because we just asked a question, it kind of helps with the flow of the conversation, showcasing signs of lower investment from your part. That way we don't go back into that logical flow of question, and coming off more interviewee. Now, some examples of the statement might look like, we'd get along too well, and that's dangerous. Or, I go to Miami all the time, we'd cross paths anyway. Or even, I'll have to find out on our first date. Once again, planting the seed towards the idea of a date. And also when you do this, it's also gonna make moving towards the close feel more natural instead of forced. Remember, even at the woman's very high interest, everything has to happen naturally. You almost have to seduce her. And whenever you follow this framework, it just makes everything else that much more easier. Now, we went through the AQS method for the top of the funnel, but there's one crucial part that you must do, and that's gonna be number 4, and that is the transfer or the close. And so here, we're gonna use the momentum built up from the assumptions, questions, and the statements to smoothly transfer the conversation towards what I call middle of the funnel. And middle of the funnel is all about setting up the date and also building comfort. And so throughout this phase, what we're gonna be doing is either exchanging numbers or Instagram, my favorite. Now there's 2 ways you can do this. Number 1 is gonna be a compliance test, which is my personal favorite, in which after you've gone through the framework, you're gonna then tell her to message you on whatever platform you want. So WhatsApp, number, IG. You might say something like, hey, I'm not on here much, go ahead and shoot me a text here, let's talk there. Now I would say the compliance test is essentially a built-in filter for high interest women, because if you are talking to low or medium interest women, best believe they are not gonna go out their way to send you a text on your IG or phone number. And so with that being said, you will probably go through a lot of drop off. However, you can also do what I call the question transfer, and that's simply funneling her by asking her what her number is or what her IG is. Now, just to recap things before we get into the live example, first off, remember the assumption or code read based upon her profile. If you don't have anything to read off, just say something random. Number 2 is gonna be the open-ended question, and I prefer to go more logistic questions. That way I can gather if she's traveling or if she's visiting. And then number 3 is gonna be the statement. Ideally within the statement, we need to plant the seed towards the date. And then lastly, we're gonna transfer and close. Now here's a quick pro tip, is that you wanna space out your messages, ideally across 2 to 3 days, to show non-neediness alongside with the fact that you are busy. Because keep in mind, top of funnel should be your absolute lowest priority within your dating funnel. Now, truth is, none of this is gonna even matter if you're not getting consistent volume in the first place. This means numbers from meeting women in real life or even matches and whatnot. And so if you want to actually get the matches so that you can actually implement this, or maybe you are getting the matches and you just wanna put this all into action, check out what I made for you down below. It's called the Romeo Effect. Now, the Romeo Effect is my plug and play system, which allows you to essentially put your dating life on autopilot. You got a good career, you got a good income, you're doing everything right. You just want to be able to attract more higher interest women and more attractive women who bring value to your life. This is why I created this system. There's no other system like it. Everybody else is gonna tell you to approach 100 women a day or throw events like you're a promoter. If you're a high value man, we do not have time for that, all right? So check out what I made for you down below. It explains the Romeo Effect in full, but for now, let's move on to the live example. So for our live example, this is a real actual text conversation. So I opened her with, of course, the assumption. I said, I can already tell you know the best coffee spots in Miami. The reason why I said this is because on her profile in one of her prompts, she mentioned that she loved coffee. Easy. Immediately when I saw that, I'm like, okay, assumption, boom, she knows the best coffee spots within the local area. She then says, I wouldn't say the best spots, but I can defend myself. And then from here, where we follow the framework, this is where we get into the open-ended question. But you don't want to blindly go into the open-ended question. You want to actually say some sort of statement in response to what she said. So I said, I know a place or two. How long have you been in Miami? Once again, the reason why I go logistical is because it's very easy, very simple. I can see whether or not she's traveling in and out, or just simply how long she's been here. She said, I've been living here for the past 12 years, a bit too long. How about you? So boom, first thing I'm noticing in this conversation is that she asks, how about you? This is a clear sign of usually a higher interest woman, and that's a great sign. When she's medium or low interest, she's probably just gonna respond to the question and not sort of ask any questions back. Now is where we move on to the statement. But remember, we still need to reply to what she said. I said, only 4 months, don't worry, won't make you my tour guide on our first date. So what am I doing here? I am now doing the statement plus the seed plant, and I added a bit of a flirty, sort of innuendo there with the winky face. You don't always have to do this. I actually think flirting is a little bit overrated when it comes to text. If she's matching with you and responding to the conversation, you don't always have to flirt. You just simply have to lead. And this is my way of leading. So far we've done assumption, open-ended question with a statement that plants the seed. She said, that is pretty recent. I wouldn't mind showing you around. Now, so far she has bitten our hook. So what do we do next? We do the transfer. I say, in that case, we will see. What's your number? Let's get off here. Boom, she sends me the number. As simple as that. Now, when I go middle of the funnel, this is where, we do some other things in terms of building comfort, but more so setting up the date. But do you see how simple and easy and fast that can be once you follow this framework? It should be literally like clockwork. You can have multiple conversations saying the same thing, following a script if you want to. It just makes it that much more easier. Now, since I really want to help you guys, I'm going to read one more here. So she actually ended up messaging me first. She said, hi. I say, you look like you'll run witchcraft on me if I break your heart. The reason why I say this, once again, assumption based upon her pictures. She kind of had this like mystical sort of spiritual sort of look about her. She said, LMAO, you did not just say that. And I said, I sensed the black cat energy, LOL. How long you been in Miami? Statement, now open-ended question. LOL, no witchcraft here, but I'm divinely protected. So I'm kind of right about her spiritual awareness. She said, I've been here for 2 months. I said, so we're both new. I already have an idea for our first date in that case. Boom, statement plus seed plant, painting the idea of us meeting out in the future. She then said, where did you move from? Now, some guys might take this as a red flag in which she really didn't respond to the idea of the first date. That's totally fine. At least we're getting some investment on her part, especially given that we didn't ask a question. We presented a statement. Now she's asking a question back. She said, where do you move from? I said, Orlando. And you? She said, oh, LOL, okay, that's not far. I moved from Laguna Beach, California. Cool. Guess what? I'm still gonna follow my system and try to get her transferred over. I said, my sister lives there for law school, beautiful area. Got a number, I'll message you there, and she sent me the number. Boom, so that was the actual transfer. But point is, most of these conversations follow the same exact system, and that is the AQS method. Truth be told, I haven't seen anybody talk about this. Most guys really approach their texting very intuitively, and that's why they get stuck on what to say. But if you follow this framework, I promise you your top of funnel texting is gonna get so much better. And once again, if you wanna put this all into action, you don't wanna guess, you wanna actually get review on your text. You also wanna have more matches on the front end. You want more attractive women in your funnel without cold approaching, without swiping for hours a day. You want your presentation to do the work for you, because the dating game is all about leverage, especially online dating. They say 90% of men are invisible, but not the guys using the Romeo effect. The guys using the Romeo effect are in fact in the top 10%. That's because we understand dating from a scientific, biological level. And once you understand what women actually respond to online, I promise you, you can never go back. Once again, click the link down below. I'll show you exactly how this full process works. I'm gonna see you guys in the next video. Peace.